New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today.
Well, I have one thing to say to that. Get 'em, Pam! Welcome to another edition of Spark the Conversation. This is your host, Mark the Spark, bringing you today's news. Well, I guess we better start there then. Pam Bondi has now announced that she's going to be going after sanctuary cities. She's going to start with New York, going after the AG, Letitia James, and the governor, Kathy Hochul. Both of them who basically run the People's Republic of New York, where I live, and I refer to it that way because it's basically communist here. We have one-party rule. It's been one-party rule for so long, I can't remember another way. And that is why everything is going down the drains. I often ask myself, how bad does it have to get before people change their voting patterns? Before people just finally wake up and decide, we're had enough of this. We need change. We need something else. This is the bottom of the barrel. I don't know. I don't see the bottom from here. I think it's going to crater a lot lower. Businesses will leave as they have been forever and for a long time. People are leaving. It's one of the most left states by people who have picked up and moved. There's been more people moved out of New York State than I think any other state, maybe even more than California. But if not, we're close second. And the best business booming in New York, they say, is U-Haul because of all the moving trucks. Moving people out of here. Anyways, I'm happy to see that somebody from the federal government is standing up to these crazy leftist nutbags who are spending all our hard-earned tax dollars on illegal immigrants without our approval. Trust me, we don't want it. We've seen them everywhere in every county of this state. We've been affected by illegals living in hotel rooms for free, committing crimes, walking up and down the streets, trashing neighborhoods, and it hasn't been good because anytime you give people free stuff, they take advantage. And it just leads to a degradation of societal peace and cleanliness. And that's what we pay taxes to have, those kind of standards. We don't pay taxes to have the government out of control, giving our money away to people who have never contributed to society or to our tax base at all, which is a majority of these people. Now, we're always going to have people on the left saying, well, what about this person? What about the people in the farms? What about this? Look, there are legitimate ways that you can get to solve any of these problems. The problem is they always look for the exception for their arguments, but the exception is not the majority. The exception is exactly that, the exception. It's the minority of cases. The majority of cases are those that are coming across the border and instantly getting on the government teat right away without giving anything back. And we don't know if they ever will give anything back. Anyways, sanctuary cities are illegal. It goes against federal law. These government officials are trying to stifle the operations of ICE. And personally, I'd love to see them locked up. I would love to see Kathy Hochul and Letitia James in handcuffs, locked up in a cell. That would make me happy. Here is the rest of that clip from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi.
Here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today.
Well, I think she made that clear. Hopefully Kathy Hochul gets the message, although I have a feeling she's not quite bright enough to get what Pam is saying, which is why I hope it results in handcuffs. But it'll probably end up being fines or something punitive, which, guess what? The taxpayers of New York will end up paying for once again. At the very least, I'm sure it's going to end up in legal fees that the New York taxpayer will have to pay for again. So once again, the burden of the ignorance of our state government falls on the shoulders of the taxpayer. Anyway, speaking of the border, Tom Homan had some words for the Pope. The Pope has been out pretty openly bashing the United States for our border policy, calling it inhumane, and find it pretty ironic since he hasn't accepted any of these immigrants, and he's got a pretty good wall around the Vatican. Here's Tom Homan on that.
For the Pope. Pope want to fix the Catholic Church. I'm saying this as a lifelong Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I was First Communion as a Catholic. Confirmation as a Catholic. He ought to fix the Catholic Church and concentrate on his work and leave border enforcement to us. He wants to attack us for securing our border. He's got a wall around the Vatican, does he not? So he's got a wall around to protect his people and himself, but we can't have a wall around the United States. So I wish he'd stick to the Catholic Church and fix that and leave border enforcement to us.
And I have to agree with Tom Homan there, for sure. Same here. As a lifelong Catholic, baptized, First Communion, confirmation, married in the Catholic Church. But this leftist Pope has got to stay in his lane. He doesn't even understand what he's talking about, because in reality, having a strong border is actually more humane, because we're not enticing immigrants to come across dangerous sections of the Rio Grande. We are not having them traverse dangerous sections of the desert. We're not having them spend their life savings on these illegal coyotes, the Mexican cartel controlled passageways, having these children and women sold into sex slavery just to get a chance to be in America. We need to stop enticing these people from doing this, and it really is in their own best interest. It is more humane to have a strong border, both for our citizens, which should be the priority, and for the citizens trying to illegally come across the border. So I agree with Tom Homan. The Pope needs to stay in his lane and stop being a hypocrite. That's my opinion on that. In news on the what Doge has been doing, checking into the government finances, of course, the left continues to melt down. This is a kind of funny, kind of cringe, definitely cringe video of some of these people singing, I think it's a union song, I don't know, but it's terrible. Cover your ears if you don't want to hear this.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on? We'll fight against George. We'll fight Elon Musk. No Elon's kept within our walls. We'll fight from dawn to dusk. Oh, which side are you on?
Somebody's got to tell them. Oh, you guys are lucky I kept that to 29 seconds. That could have gone on a lot longer. That song went on for like over a minute and a half. It was brutal. I when I was clipping it out, I was like, "Holy cow, we gotta tone this down because the listeners are gonna complain." And I couldn't blame you. That is terrible. Like I said, somebody's got to tell them. That's cringe. Sorry, you ain't getting any supporters out that way. But of course, the left is always out of touch and doesn't know when to stop and where to stop. I mean, they could just look at poll numbers and say, they could see this is what the American people want: to shrink the government, to stop the waste, fraud, and abuse. That's what the American people want. And the fact that they're trying to cover up and not be transparent, the fact that they're complaining just because Elon Musk is out there exposing what some of these expenditures are of your money, of my money, of our money together as taxpayers. The fact that they're so worried about it being exposed is telling you that they're the ones benefiting from it. They're using it to push their agenda. They're using it to make their friends and family rich, and it's fraudulent. Here's Donald Trump saying the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Tremendous fraud. There's tremendous fraud. And it's hard to believe that you can have that kind of fraud. You're talking about are you talking about what? Wait. Which are you talking? You're talking about with regard to all of the investigations that are going on about this stupidity. What we're going to do is tomorrow I'm having a news conference. I'm going to read to you some of the names that hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars have been given to. And if you tell me that we should be giving money to those things, those entities, I think you'll probably have to leave as a reporter because you're not very talented. When you look at the kind of money, billions and billions of dollars being thrown away illegally, and there's no chance. I mean, I say it in front of our Attorney General, there's no chance that there's not kickbacks or something going on. When you give millions and millions of dollars to somebody that stands to look at something for 15 minutes and walks away with millions of dollars, that money's coming back in some form. And that's only one form of corruption. The biggest thing is what they do to our country. They're taking massive amounts of money and spending it on items. I went through a list of 200 expenditures that were made, and I found 3 that looked like they were reasonable. Okay, 3. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff. And I want to commend Elon because he's done he doesn't need this. You know, he's abused by you people every day. He's found more things than anybody could find. I think he's got the credibility to do it. I know he does. And it's his group of people. You know, they started off with 12. I call them 12 geniuses. They started off with 12, and they went to 20 and 25, and now they're up to almost 100. People are joining to help them because there's a massive fraud that's taken place.
Absolutely massive fraud. And like I said, you know it, I know it. We just have not been able to prove it because it's been covered up and hidden by the people in power for so long. You know, this is one of the reasons why a lot of us want term limits for every position, because these people stay in office so long, they build this government structure around them to protect themselves so that they can never get voted out. And they get to create this power structure within Congress, within the Senate, the House, especially because those people tend to hold on to their jobs for a long period of time because nobody really expects them to get anything done, and they go based off name recognition. So once they're in for a long time. And they get their own little bully pulpit. They get the media's attention. So people just believe what they say because they have no reason, no ability to look into what they say as being true or not. And of course, the media's got their back. So this is like the first opportunity that we see as taxpayers to actually have some transparency. And so that's why we're so excited about this opportunity to have Elon Musk, an outsider, Donald Trump, who really is still an outsider, in these positions, pushing for transparency, pushing for exposure. Like we say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. All we want to do is shine a light on things and see how it looks. The fact that they're trying to make it so that we can't shine any light into the corners, into the back shelves, tells you there's something hidden back there. And it's probably a dead body. Metaphorically speaking, of course. So, and this is, happening in all the departments. We see a Department of Justice now. They're looking into a lot of expenditures that are at least questionable. A lot of the stuff in Ukraine, which we're going to get to in a little bit, but, even President Zelensky says he's missing $100 billion. He doesn't know where it is. And I'm sure we don't know where it went. I'm sure there's no tracking. We've heard stories of weapons that we've given to Ukraine showing up in other countries, have been sold to terrorists. And there's no tracking to this, no accountability. So anyways, the EPA director, Lee Zeldin from my home state, he was a governor candidate who gave Kathy Hochul a run for her money. But of course, she's got it locked up here, the Girls Club, apparently, with her and Letitia. But he did land a job at the head of the EPA, and he's talking about some of the corruption and fraud and abuse that they've found there, too.
Hi, this is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. One of my very top priorities at EPA is to be an excellent steward of your hard-earned tax dollars. There will be zero tolerance of any waste and abuse. An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic meant the Biden administration knew they were wasting it. Following this revelation, during my meetings with members of Congress, I made a very important commitment to them and to the American people, which I reiterated at my confirmation hearing that if confirmed, I would immediately get a full accounting. Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Even further, this pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency. Just under $7 billion was sent to one entity called the Climate United Fund. I'm sure you and I now have some of the same questions. How do these organizations decide how to allocate funding? How much money have they given out so far and to whom? Are there any former Biden EPA staffers who are now working at these entities? Let me make one thing abundantly clear. At this point, there is zero reason to suspect any wrongdoing by the bank. Here's my position as EPA administrator. The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic. EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all of these funds. We will review every penny that has gone out the door. I will be referring this matter to the Inspector General's office, and will work with the Justice Department as well. The days of irresponsibly shoveling boatloads of cash to far-left activist groups in the name of environmental justice and climate equity are over. The American public deserves a more transparent and accountable government than what transpired these past 4 years. We take our obligations under the law as seriously as it gets. I've directed my team to find your gold bars, and they found them. Now we will get them back inside of control of government as we pursue next steps. As President Trump has vowed, we are going to usher in a new golden age of American success for the citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed.
And continuing to speak about people on the left who are melting down, you've got this senator, Representative Robert Garcia, who is on the DOGE committee, and he's talking about bringing actual weapons against DOGE and Elon Musk. You know, there's metaphors and political speech, and then there's somebody who says actual weapons. You want to talk about like dangerous rhetoric? That's what we're talking about. And he wants to talk about not being serious. Listen to this.
To bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight for democracy, for the future of this country, and it's important to push back on the chairperson of this committee. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about having decorum, about bipartisanship. This is the person that lies more than anybody else in the entire Congress. And so if she is going to make a mockery of hearings, I want to make sure that us as Democrats are bringing that same level of energy. And of course, after those comments, we went into exactly what Elon Musk is trying to do, dismantling the Department of Labor, dismantling the Department of Education, dismantling all of our consumer protection agencies. And so it's all important, but it's also important to get the attention of the American public and call Elon Musk out for what he is, and to make people know that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a serious legislator, and she shouldn't be treated as such.
So Representative Robert Garcia wants to tell us who's a serious person and who's not a serious person. If he wants to say he's a serious person and says he's going to bring actual weapons of war, I think we need to take him seriously And I think he needs to be brought up on charges if he's going to talk like this. They went after President Trump when he said, go peacefully to the Capitol building. This guy is talking about actual weapons. He didn't say anything metaphorical. He didn't step back on it at all. I think that they need to press this issue and start talking about, what's par for par, because he's talking about actual violence. This is not just political speech. He said actual. That takes away the chance that he wasn't meaning actual, because he said it, and you need to treat him like he's saying it as if it's the real thing. So I hope that they go after him on this, and I hope he faces some kind of repercussions, because this is the kind of stuff that creates bigger problems instead of fixing problems. And it's not democracy like they say it is. It's dangerous. Anyways, we were talking about Ukraine. President Trump was talking about some different initiatives that they have. They have some preliminary peace deals lined up, talking with Putin and Zelensky. And it sounds like everybody's ready to come to the table now that they know that President Trump is in the House and he is ready to take control, and that we're not going to put up with this from either side for very long. And President Trump points out that this probably wouldn't have even started if it wasn't for the weakness of Joe Biden and him mentioning the possibility of Ukraine being let into NATO.
Yesterday were pretty accurate. I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war now, and I was right about that. This is a war that would have never happened if I were president.
But you don't think it's President Biden's fault, not President Putin? I mean, he's the one.
I think Biden is incompetent, and I think when he said that they could join NATO, I thought that was a very stupid thing to say. I thought when he said, well, it depends if it's a minor incursion. In other words, it's okay if Russia does a minor incursion. I thought that was a very foolish thing to say. Yesterday were pretty accurate. I don't see any way that...
And of course, the lamestream media rushes to protect Joe Biden even after he's long sailed away. In fact, we don't even know where he is anymore. He's probably on a beach somewhere, like he was for the last 4 years, actually. So there's probably not too much of a difference. But Donald Trump points out that because of the poor leadership of Joe Biden, this is the cause. I mean, President Trump says this wouldn't have happened under him. And think about it. Think about the destruction in Kyiv. Think about the destruction in Russia. Think about the destruction in Kharkiv. Think about the over 1 million people dead. Over 1 million people are dead because of this war. Those people would still be alive. The farmlands would still be untouched. The city of Kyiv would be untouched. They would have had another election, and Zelensky probably would have been out of power, which could be the reason why this war keeps going on. Hunter Biden probably would be collecting still money from Burisma. Oh, wait, that's not a real thing, is it? Oh, yeah, it is. So, this would have never happened if Trump would have been the president back then. So, I mean, as bad as it was, I don't know. I can't even say it was worth it because over 1 million people are dead. How do you even justify that? That's ridiculous. And yeah, does Putin bear some responsibility? Sure. But it still wouldn't have happened if President Trump would have been in control. So now Trump gets into what he would have done if he was in office.
He kicks them out, of course, because they illegally annexed Crimea. I mean, how would you have responded if Russia invaded or took over?
They took Crimea during Obama. 2014. They took, well, now they're looking to take the whole thing. Then they took a big chunk of land and people, as you know, during Bush. And now they're trying to take the whole thing during Biden. You know, the only one that didn't give them anything is Trump. They never took anything with Trump, nothing, not 2 inches of property of land. But Crimea was Obama. And then Bush gave him a lot, you remember. And then, in fact, it's a sort of a standard little phrase. And Biden's giving them everything because this is a war that shouldn't have been had. And the only one that didn't give them anything is Trump. That's the way it is.
And he smartly points out how Ukraine was not touched by Russia at all during his last administration. And he basically points to every administration or surrounding his and how Russia had taken some of Ukraine, or at least, incurred on its territory, at least during every other administration. And he says, why did that happen? The left wanted you to believe that he was buddy-buddy with Putin and, he owed Putin something, or Putin had something over him, or if Trump wanted to, he would have just given Ukraine over, said, go ahead and march in there. Same with this administration. He could do this again in this term, but he's not. So, it's just ridiculous. So Donald Trump put out a post that was talking about some of the deals, the talk he had with Putin. And I'm going to put it up here. He says, I just had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. We both reflected on the great history of our nations and the fact that we fought so successfully together in World War II, remembering that Russia lost tens of millions of people, and we likewise lost so many. We talked about the strengths of our respective nations and the great benefit that we will someday have working together. But first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe it very strongly in it. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We have also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately, and we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something which I will be doing right now. I have asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of the CIA John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Michael Walls, and the Administrator and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to lead the negotiations, which I feel strongly will be successful. Millions of people have died in a war that would not happen if I were president, but it did happen, so it must end. No more lives should be lost. I want to thank President Putin for his time and effort with respect to this call, and for the release yesterday of Mark Fogel, a wonderful man that I personally greeted last night at the White House. I believe this effort will lead to a successful conclusion, hopefully soon. So that was a message put out on social media by Donald Trump, talking about his common sense strategies. And really, if you look at a lot of his, things that he's done so far, and his policies and his actions, that's something a term I've used over and over again, common sense. It just makes sense. The war's got to end. There needs to be a stopping point, and I think both sides have finally agreed to come to that point. And also, Zelensky has realized that he needs to play ball as well, and has agreed to let the United States take some of these expensive, very highly sought-after minerals, the rare earth, out of Ukraine as repayment for a lot of the money that we've given them and a lot of the equipment we've given them to fight this war. Because without the United States, let's be honest, Ukraine would not exist right now. If they would have been counting on Europe to come and save them, they would not exist right now. So that is good to see. Also, the Director of Defense, Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was also talking about Ukraine. And here's some of what his expectations are.
Want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. A durable peace for Ukraine must include robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again. This must not be Minsk 3.0. That said, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
So as Pete mentions there will not be United States forces there. Ukraine should not be expecting to be let into NATO as a partner in NATO, but there will be joint forces of European military in Ukraine to help secure their border. So they will offer some protections of Ukraine from Russia, but they are not going to have NATO membership. So I think this is a pretty good win for Ukraine. There are going to be some land swaps as well with these. Trump alluded to the fact that Ukraine may end up with like tiny parts of its parts that like Crimea or whatever that it had lost because they have parts of Russia right now in their possession. Russia has parts of Ukraine in their possession. So part of the peace deal may include swaps back and forth that benefit both countries. But ultimately, the lines will be drawn pretty much where they were before, which just goes to show how pointless this whole war was. The deaths of those multi-million, or over a million people, the destruction of the buildings, of the farms, of power plants, factories, there was all for nothing. All to have the same lines as they were before, which ultimately should be considered a win, I suppose, for Zelensky. It's not a win for Russia, but, they can come out without too much of a tail between their legs. And ultimately, it's only a win for Trump. It's kind of a win for the U.S. I mean, it's definitely a sign of strength for us, but the whole thing was just a pointless exercise. Here's Pete continuing. He's talking about the expectations of Europe and our NATO members in this going forward.
Our European allies should take primary responsibility for defense of the continent, which means security ownership by all allies, guided by a clear understanding of strategic realities, and it's an imperative given the strategic realities that we face. And that begins with increasing defense spending. 2% is a start, as President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. We can talk all we want about values. Values are important. But you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches. There is no replacement for hard power. As much as we may not want to like the world we live in some cases, there's nothing like hard power. It should be obvious that increasing allied European defense spending is critical, as the President of the United States has said.
This is true. The requiring NATO members to uphold their part of the defense is so critical, and something that they've not been held to account under previous administrations, especially since this is the territory, like the main purpose of NATO is to defend European nations. They're not going to come and help protect us. What do we need protection from? I mean, we need protection from the Mexican border, but you don't see any of them coming here to protect us from that, or help build the wall, or help secure our border, even though we're being invaded from the south and the north. But we don't really need their help. I think we're quite capable as long as we're willing to do it. But, they aren't going to come and help us. The purpose of NATO is to help the European continent. And we do have some interest in it, in trading partners and, some things that they have to exchange with us. But ultimately, they benefit more from this agreement than we do. Why are we the ones carrying the burden? And why Donald Trump is the first one to ask this question really makes you wonder what the other people what the other politicians, other previous presidents were getting out of an agreement that hurts America. I mean, Donald Trump is the first America first president that I can ever recall in my lifetime. He's the first one. Everybody else said a bunch of things, but never followed through on it. He's following through on his promises. So good for him. Thank goodness we have these smart, competent people in these positions, like Pete Hegseth, like Pam Bondi. And there's more. Like today, RFK Jr., he was finally confirmed by the full Senate and sworn in. Here's that swearing in ceremony now.
I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
So he was sworn in, and it's good news. Good news for the country. I don't care what you think about RFK. He's asking the right questions. Again, it's just bringing transparency back to the federal government. That's what he's doing. And like I said before, this is the same thing as Doge. If you're afraid of the questions, if you're afraid of somebody asking you the questions, then that means you're hiding something. If you're not hiding something and you truly believe, I mean, you could look at Dr. Fauci, right? What happened every time you question his authority? He would get angry and he would tell you that you're questioning the science because he was the science. He didn't have supporting documentation to prove what he was saying was correct. What he did was he belittled you, told you were dumb, told you weren't competent, weren't capable of making a decision, and that you should just trust him. And that's what people do when they're hiding something or they don't have the knowledge to back up what they're saying. RFK Jr. is asking the questions that nobody was asking before. He's willing to go and research things that were just assumed to be true. And that's what we need back in the federal government to restore trust in these institutions, to restore trust into the government, to make the government more efficient, which is something that the whole Trump administration has dedicated itself to, and to bring transparency back as well. So a huge win for Make America Great Again, and a huge win for Make America Healthy Again. A next person up who should be receiving confirmation soon is Kash Patel. He's going to be the director of the FBI, and he is very competent, very smart. He knows the Bureau inside and out. He's been in various positions of leadership throughout the FBI. Here's a clip back from 2023 talking about a little bit about a book that he wrote, but he was doing an interview with Don Jr. on a podcast. And I just took this clip because I think it shows his competency quite well.
Out there, you are fearless in the media and you care more about America than you do about your own regard. And when you put a group of people like that together, it has an effect. And I'm seeing it around the country. And that's what motivated me to file this lawsuit. I didn't want to go and sue the director of the FBI and the former attorney general of the United States. But it's not about us. It's not about me. It's about showing Americans that if they're doing this to you, the Trump family, if they're doing it to career government servants, if they're doing it to senior staffers in Congress, if they're doing it to members of Congress, If they're doing it to people because they put their hand on the Bible or go to a house of worship, what do you think they're doing that you don't know about? We have to uncover that. And that's where I strike back at Congress again. We are 9 months into a Republican majority. I'll give you this in, I don't know, ago. They wrote a letter. Fine. I want the documents not for me. I want the documents for the American people at the next election cycle to show them that the FBI unlawfully surveilled us and got away with it. Yeah. What else did they do and get away with? And more importantly, what's the solution? In my opinion, the solution is sending Donald Trump back to the White House, of course, but it's going in with a full suite of personnel and the levers of purse strings that have to be snatched back from these government gangsters so that they are reminded that they work for us. And the other thing I talk about in my book, and people aren't going to like this, but we got to start impeaching judges. The last check that we have on our Constitution used to be the federal judiciary. And now we've seen them weaponized against Jan 6, against GJT, and against so many other people because they dared to vote for someone they disliked. These people are acting unconstitutionally, and Congress must impeach them when we have both houses of Congress back, hopefully in 2024. That is a drastic measure. And me as a former public defender and prosecutor, I didn't think I'd ever say that because I was like, judges are great. They wear the robe, they do the right thing. But now you look at any case that Donald Trump's been charging, and almost every judge, except one, is handling this thing as if they were not a judge, but they were a political terrorist.
So he shows there that he's very familiar with the weaponization of the federal government. He's shown that he understands that the federal government has been used to attack its, political enemies of whoever's in charge at the time. And he understands that these things need to be investigated, and he needs to root out the people within the Bureau that still have these beliefs, that still think it's okay to use the federal government to attack its opponents, to suppress the freedom of speech. And he understands that the power that the federal government has in these institutions and the power that they have to lose if these institutions lose the faith of the American people. Again, he's just trying to restore transparency and trust in the federal government, which is important. Another way we restore trust in the federal government is by releasing secrets that have been held from the American people for a long time. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, she's the leader of the Declassification Task Force, and she's a representative who is leading up some of the releasing of declassified documents such as the JFK assassination and other documents which we discussed before. She has released, because she's seen some of this information, it hasn't really been fully gone through, but she's seen it before we have, and she's releasing some pretty bombshell news that nobody's really covering. I heard this on one place throughout the whole day, one news station, and that she believes there are two shooters in the assassination of JFK. This would be such bombshell information. Now, granted, I still don't understand, even with being bombshell, huge, different opinion that's never been mentioned before, except by conspiracy theorists, which may win again. The fact that it's been covered up, I just don't understand who it was protecting, except for maybe the bureaus of the federal government who are supposed to investigate this and botched it. But those people are probably dead. They're not around anymore to feel the wrath of misleading the public or just being wrong.
What's your priority list? Is Epstein, 9/11?
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
So why are we continuing to cover this up? I really don't understand it. Maybe with the release of the information, we'll find out more and we'll start to understand a little bit better. why all this stuff was being kept from the American public. But I mean, it's good to see. I don't see the danger in releasing the information. And that's why there is a task force assigned to this, so that if there is truly information that would be dangerous to the public, if it was released, then they can, make different decisions and not just, carte blanche release everything. But I really find it hard to believe that there's anything that dangerous in this documentation. And it's good that it's being released, since it is our tax dollars that paid for these investigations. It's our government that's supposed to work for us that's holding these secrets from us. And ultimately, it's just beyond time for us to find out the truth behind some of these things. And again, it just goes back to restoring trust in the federal government, restoring that transparency, which is the word I think I'm going to use more than anything in this during this administration, during this term of the presidency of Donald Trump, is I'm going to use transparency as the key word. So unlike the left, who's using oligarchy and a danger to our republic and a constitutional crisis, which is the newest word they're using, I'm going to use the word transparency and common sense, because I think those words best describe the Trump administration so far. Anyways, I thank you for joining me for another episode. I hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with a friend, ring the notification bell, and return tomorrow for another episode of Spark the Conversation. Don't forget to go out and volunteer for something meaningful, and also spark the conversation.